In the main event, former interim title challenger Kevin Lee looks to right the ship after a failed bid for the title against Edson Barboza. The title picture is log-jammed right now, but a win still puts their names into contention with a win. Also on the card are fighters such as Frankie Edgar, Dave Branch and Jim Miller, among others. Be sure to tune in, as this fight will be high on entertainment value. With that, let's look at the card and make some picks. Kevin Lee vs. Edson Barboza. The main event is a high-stakes lightweight bout between two top 15 fighters, as former interim title challenger Kevin Lee looks to take out Brazilian buzzsaw Edson Barboza. This is a striker versus grappler matchup, with Barboza representing the banger and Lee representing the mat fighter. Barboza is a Muay Thai stylist with immense technical ability, as well as having great power behind each punch, kick, elbow and knee he throws. That said, he has struggled against top-level wrestlers who are able to get him down, where they beat him up and tap him out. That was seen in recent losses to Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson, though he has 3 recent victories over Beneil Dariush, Gilbert Melendez and Anthony Pettis. Lee likely has the stylistic matchup, and not only that, he is very large for a lightweight. He is coming off a title loss to Ferguson in his last fight, but that reversed an impressive 5-fight win streak over the likes of Michael Chiesa, Francisco Trinaldo and Magomed Mustafayev. This is Lee's fight to lose. Barboza has a striker's chance of landing something massive, but Lee is too quick and explosive on the takedown to be thwarted by Barboza. Lee scores a late finish or a clear-cut decision. Frankie Edgar vs. Cub Swanson. Featherweight counterparts are set to square off in a pivotal co-main event, as former lightweight champion Frankie Edgar meets up with the always exciting Cub Swanson. Edgar is still one of the best featherweights in the world despite the fact he's coming off a loss. He's a skilled wrestler and boxer, a combination of skills that carries him well in the cage. His toughness is legendary, though his chin was finally cracked in his most recent outing courtesy of a brutal Brian Ortega knockout. That loss reversed a 2-fight win streak over Yair Rodriguez and Jeremy Stevens. He will be met by Swanson, a striker with big power and entertainment value. He will be more than happy to meet Edgar on the feet. Like Edgar, he's coming off a loss to Ortega. That loss reversed a 4-fight surge in which he scored decision victories over Artem Lobov, Doo Ho Choi and Tatsuya Kawajiri. If Edgar uses his wrestling wisely here, he can certainly dominate Swanson. On the feet, it will be competitive. Edgar has a more viable skill set, so expect him to score a much-needed victory here. Justin Willis vs. Chase Sherman. The big boys are set to bang in one that likely won't see the judges, as American Kickboxing Academy fighter Justin Willis squares off with Chase Sherman. Willis likes to bang on the feet and is very powerful when he lands what he throws. That said, if needed, he will bring the fight down, but he prefers to stand. He's taken 2 fights with the UFC so far, scoring a unanimous nod over James Mulheron in his debut before knocking out Alan Crowder with 1 punch in his most recent outing. He squares off with Sherman, who now finds himself training with Greg Jackson and his crew out in New Mexico. He also comes to bang on the feet, so he will meet Willis toe-to-toe. After dropping his first 2 UFC bouts, Sherman came back with wins over Rashad Coulter and Damian Grabowski. However, that short win streak was brought to a halt in his last fight, where Shamil Abdurakhimov knocked him out in under 90 seconds. Sherman is a striker, but has been put down before when he's outgunned on the feet. That's the case here. Willis scores another knockout for the win. Thiago Santos vs. Dave Branch. Top 20 middleweights will collide in a clash of styles, as Brazilian banger Thiago Santos looks to take out grappling ace and former 2-division WSOF champion Dave Branch. Branch is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter that does his best work when he closes the distance and scores takedowns. His submission game is impressive, something that will be vital in taking on a guy like Santos. This is his 2nd stint with the UFC, and so far in this run, he's 1-1. He opened his 2nd stint by scoring a contentious decision over Krzysztof Jotko before he tapped to strikes at the hands of Luke Rockhold. He meets up with Santos, a vicious, technical striker who is apt to get the knockout in his victories. When he smells blood in a fight, he has the killer instinct to finish things. That's been seen on his current 4-fight winning streak, where he's scored violent knockouts of Anthony Smith, Jack Hermanson, Gerald Meerschaert and Jack Marshman. This is a classic grappler versus striker matchup, which means whoever gets the fight to where they're most comfortable controls their destiny. Santos is going to pepper Branch from a distance and accumulate damage. It will lead to his 5th straight knockout finish, putting him into title contention. Aljamain Sterling vs. Brett Johns. Two of the best bantamweights not currently in the title picture are set to meet up in an important 135-pound bout, as Welsh fighter Brett Johns takes on his biggest test to date in Aljamain Sterling. Johns is an undefeated prospect who has exploded onto the scene of the UFC. He's a grinder that has good takedowns and submissions, something that may be tested by the wrestling and grappling skills of Sterling. He won all 3 of his UFC fights, which includes a highlight reel 30-second calf slicer of Joe Soto, as well as decisions over Albert Morales and Kwan Ho Kwok. Sterling has a great edge in terms of speed, and is likely the better striker of the two. As mentioned, he does have good wrestling and explosiveness, which could cancel out with the skill set of Johns. Matt Serra disciple is coming off a brutal knockout loss to Marlon Moraes, so it will be interesting to see how he's recovered since that blow. If his head is unclear after that loss, Sterling has a tough stylistic advantage over Johns. If he's apprehensive from that KO, it could lead to an opening for Johns. I will take Sterling here, but with some concern. Jim Miller vs. Dan Hooker. Longtime veteran Jim Miller is looking to stay afloat in the UFC lightweight division, but in his way is a scrappy New Zealand native looking to take to his home turf in Dan Hooker. Miller has hit a stall in his career, as he's clearly in the twilight of his impressive go in the sport. It's no disrespect, the man only fights top guys, and after a long career of punishment and tough tasks, he's just slowed down. That said, he's still a capable boxer, a strong wrestler and an impressive submission fighter. He's looking to reverse his fortunes, though, as he's dropped his last 3 fights to Francisco Trinaldo, Anthony Pettis and Dustin Poirier. He takes on Hooker, a Tiger Muay Thai camper that has shown great toughness in his tenure and has improved a ton. He has both knockout power and submission ability, which makes for an interesting contrast to the style of Miller. Hooker picked up his 2 biggest career victories in his last 2 outings, as he knocked out Ross Pearson with a vicious knee before choking out Mark Diakis. Hooker looks to be hitting a peak. He's been very impressive recently, especially against guys who certainly aren't slouches. However, Miller's tendency to fight top guys and be competitive consistently is hard to vote against. Miller wins, but it won't be an easy task. Preliminary card: Ian LaFleur vs. Alex Garcia. A pair of hulking welterweights are set to do battle in a pivotal bout, as Dominican-Canadian Alex Garcia looks to take out Long Island MMA product Ryan LaFleur. LaFleur is a grinder that is not ever going to be the most exciting guy out there, but he will be a dominant force when he can wrestle guys to the mat. He's beat some very good guys in the UFC like Ron Carnero and Mike Pierce, but in his last 4 bouts, he has fallen to the likes of Damian Maia and Alex Oliveira. He will square off with Garcia, a physically imposing fighter with big power on the feet and some good skills on the ground. He will need to sprawl and brawl here, though, as grappling with LaFleur is risky business. He's shuffled between wins and losses in his last 4, finishing Mike Pyle and Muslim Salikov while falling to Tim Means and Sean Strickland. This is an interesting bout that may elicit some boos from the fans, but will be a strategical chess match. LaFleur's wrestling will bust through Garcia's defenses, earning the New York-based fighter a unanimous nod on the scorecards. Magomed Bibulatov vs. Yuta Sasaki. A pair of international flyweights descend on Atlantic City in a pivotal bout, as Russian Magomed Bibulatov squares off with Japanese fighter Yuta Sasaki. Coming into the UFC, Bibulatov was the hottest flyweight prospect in the world and a guy many pundits expected to challenge Demetrius Johnson for the title within a few fights. It was a fair appraisal, given his tough-as-nails style that allows him to score wins via knockout and submission. He was on track in his debut, as Bibulatov took out Janelle Lausa, but he was brutally knocked out in his next fight by John Moraga in the first round. He looks to right the ship and regain his potential contender status against Sasaki, an experienced Japanese grappler with solid takedowns and submission ability. He will not strike much with Bibulatov, and will try to get him to the mat, though it will be tough. He's 2-2 since dropping from the bantamweight division, scoring wins over Willie Gates and Justin Scoggins, while falling to Jussier da Silva and Wilson Reese. This is a bad matchup for Sasaki. He won't out-wrestle Bibulatov, and he's not nearly as good a striker as the Russian. Bibulatov wins this fight any way he wants it. Cr Bahadurzada vs. Luan Chagas. One of the most underrated welterweights returns to the division in an interesting bout, as Afghani-born Cr Bahadurzada takes on Brazil's Luan Chagas. Bahadurzada is a guy that should be higher on the UFC welterweight ladder than he is, but just isn't compete often enough. Since 2013, the brutal striker has competed just twice, something that has severely stunted his growth in the division. Those 2 fights were wins, though, as he submitted Brandon Thatch and knocked out Rob Wilkinson. The Jackson Winklejohn rep takes that finishing style in against Chagas, a rounded fighter who would be wise to turn this into a grappling match. The Brazilian is a tad underrated at this point, though his 1-1-1 record makes that hard to overly justify. While he did lose to Eric Silva, he drew on very late notice against Sergio Moraes and choked out Jim Wallhead in his most recent fight. That considered, Chagas is running into a buzzsaw. Bahadurzada is a beast and is going to work him on the feet. Bahadurzada scores another finish and looks to the future to be more active. Corey Anderson vs. Patrick Cummins. Light heavyweight wrestlers are set to square off in an interesting chess match, as Corey Anderson and Patrick Cummins look to inch up the crowded 205-pound ladder. Both Anderson and Cummins are good wrestlers. Cummins is more of a workmanlike, persistent wrestler that will keep moving forward and looking to hook his opponent's leg throughout the fight until he gets it. Anderson is more of an athletic, quick-on-the-feet wrestler that uses movement and angles to set up his takedowns. In terms of striking, Anderson holds an advantage in technique and power in that department. In terms of recent history, Cummins is on a 2-fight winning streak, scoring decisions over Gian Vellante and Jan Blachowicz. Anderson, on the other hand, is on a 2-fight skid, taking losses to Oven St. Preux and Jimmy Manua. It's funny how these guys have opposite streaks, and yet, I will still take the man on the losing streak. Anderson scores a decision victory. Aspelad vs. Leslie Smith. 2 exciting female bantamweights are jockeying for position in a shallow division, as youngster Aspen Ladd puts her undefeated record on the line against brawler Leslie Smith. Ladd is the best bantamweight prospect that the UFC currently has, as she's just 22 years old and has been very dominant through 6 pro fights. All of those fights have taken place in Invicta and the UFC. She's a ferocious grappler with some decent striking ability, which is often seen in her fights. He owns finishes in all of her fights but one, as she's put away Lena Landsberg and Amanda Cooper before the scorecards. She also owns a decision over Tufvet Sigjara Eubanks. As for Smith, something with her weighs heavy. She's been trying to organize a fighters union, so the question becomes how focused has she been for this bout? Smith is as tough as they come and loves to bang it out on the feet, but she's also had a lot of damage accumulation in her time. That being said, she is riding high on a 2-fight surge. She decisioned Irina Aldana on enemy terrain before knocking out Amanda Lemos in her most recent affair. Smith will need to be cautious with the young Ladd, as she's a beast on takedowns and relentless from top position. Ladd dominates but is unable to finish the durable Smith. Merab Dvalishvili vs. Ricky Simon. Bantamweights are looking to get their name in the mix, as Georgian Merab Dvalishvili squares off with late replacement newcomer Ricky Simon. Dvalishvili runs with Matt Serra's crew in New York and has a good ground game like the rest of the crew. He's a powerful wrestler with stiff hips on the defensive and explosiveness on offense. Not only that, but he has crippling knockout power in his hands, which can change the fight in the blink of an eye. He's looking to have a more successful outing than his UFC debut, where he dropped a tight split decision to Frankie Edgar. He takes on Simon, a well-rounded fighter like Dvalishvili. He has good jiu-jitsu and solid hands on the feet, so he will match up well here. He finds himself on a 5-fight win streak, including a Dana White Contender Series victory over Donovan Frello, as well as LFA Bantamweight Championship wins over UFC vet Chico Camus and Vinicius Zani. This should be a great fight and a strategic chess match. It's a coin flip, but Simon will take a very close decision in his UFC debut. Tony Martin vs. Keita Nakamura. After a career cutting a ton of weight to get to lightweight, Tony Martin will now come up to the welterweight division when he takes on Japanese veteran Keita Nakamura. Martin is a Team Lloyd Irvin rep with a good wrestling base, massive size for the weight class and impressive strength. He has no problem getting on the inside and grabbing a hold of his opponent, ragdolling them to the ground and obtaining top position. His loss to Olivier Aubin Mercier in his last outing reversed an impressive 3-fight search, in which Martin scored wins over Johnny Case, Alex White and Felipe Oliveri. He takes on Nakamura, a man who has been around the block a few times. Nakamura has a good submission skill set in his own right, though his wrestling is not as refined as that of Martin. He's in his second UFC stint to date, and is 3-2 since coming back, trading wins and losses. His wins have been submissions over Jin Lang Lee and Kyle Noak, as well as a decision over Alex Morono in his most recent offering. Stylistically, both men are suited for the ground. However, Martin's physical gifts and wrestling skills are going to be too much for Nakamura here. Martin scores a late finish or decision.